Ambassador Rien had watched 16 species surrender to the Valerian Dominion. She had documented each conquest with the cold precision her government required. The pattern never changed. The Valorians would strike first, kill millions, and wait for the white flags to rise. It always took less than a day. When the Dominion announced Earth as their next target, Rien felt nothing but tired acceptance. Another primitive world. Another easy victory. Another species that would learn to kneel. She was wrong. The attack came without warning on a Tuesday morning. 3 kinetic strikes from orbit hit simultaneously. São Paulo vanished in fire. Mumbai crumbled into dust. Chicago became a crater filled with smoke and screaming. 12 million humans died in the first 60 minutes. High Sovereign Malthus watched the destruction from his flagship with satisfaction. His species had perfected the art of breaking worlds. The formula was simple. Hit hard. Hit fast. Let the survivors understand that resistance meant extinction. Every species in the galaxy understood this math. Pain now or annihilation later. They always chose pain. He broadcast his demands across every frequency Earth could receive. Unconditional surrender. Immediate disarmament. The installation of Valerian governors in every major city. Humanity had 6 hours to comply. The 6 hours passed in silence. Malthus frowned at his communication officer. Technical difficulties? No. High Sovereign. Their receivers are functioning. They simply are not responding. This was unusual. Most species began begging within the first hour. Malthus assumed the humans were in shock. He had seen it before. Sometimes the weaker races needed time to process their new reality. He gave them another 6 hours. More silence. Ambassador Rien observed from her diplomatic vessel at the edge of the system. She had expected to record the standard surrender ceremony by now. Instead, her instruments showed something strange. Human military channels had gone dark. Their civilian networks had gone quiet. The entire planet seemed to be holding its breath. On the surface, the truth was simpler and more terrifying than the Valorians could have imagined. Humanity was not in shock. Humanity was angry. Admiral Rosa Delgado stood in the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains. She was 58 years old. She had served her planet for 34 of those years. She had trained for wars that never came, against enemies that existed only in simulations. Now the enemy was real. Now the enemy had killed her daughter. Maria had been 26. She had worked as a nurse in Sao Paulo. She had called her mother 3 days ago to talk about nothing important. The weather, a boy she liked, a recipe she wanted to try. Rosa would never hear her voice again. Around her, officers from every nation on Earth worked in grim coordination. Old rivalries had evaporated in the fire of the strikes. American generals consulted with Chinese admirals. Russian commanders shared intelligence with their European counterparts. The species had united in a way it never had before. Not through hope, through rage. The Valerian fleet is holding position, an analyst reported. 200 warships. They are waiting for our response. Rosa has studied the tactical display. The enemy was stronger. The enemy was more advanced. The enemy had just murdered 12 million of her people. None of that mattered. Send them a response, she said quietly. What message, Admiral? Rosa thought of Maria. Off is São Paulo Berni. Of all the families across the world who had lost everything in a single morning. Send them coordinates. The exact location of their flagship. Let them know we can see them. Let them know we are watching. And let them wonder what we plan to do about it. The transmission was sent. No words. No demands. Just numbers. High Sovereign Malthus received the message and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Uncertainty. What does this mean? He demanded. His tactical officer studied the data with confusion. They have identified our exact position. High Sovereign. They are telling us they know where we are. That is not a surrender. No, High Sovereign. It is not. Malthus stared at the blue and green world below him. He had conquered races that spanned multiple star systems. He had brought empires to their knees. He had never received a response like this. That a species that had just lost 12 million people should be weeping, should be begging, should be doing anything except sending targeting data to their attackers. Send ground forces, he ordered. Perhaps they need a more personal demonstration of our power. Ambassador Rien recorded everything. She noted the moment when the first Valerian dropships descended toward Earth's surface. She noted the silence that continued from the human side. She noted the way Malthius paced his bridge with growing agitation, and she noted something else. Something her instruments barely detected. Behind Earth's moon, hidden from Valerian sensors, human ships were gathering. Not many, not enough to challenge the Dominion fleet directly, but they were there, waiting, planning. Rien had studied predators across the galaxy. She recognized the behavior she was witnessing. This was not the stillness of prey freezing in terror. This was the stillness of something preparing to strike back. She began composing a private message to her government. It contained only 3 words. This will be different. 48 hours after the first strike, Private Yusuf Okonkwo sat in a bombed-out school building and watched the sky burn orange, but he was 22 years old. He had joined the military because his father had served and his grandfather before that. He had never expected to fight aliens. He had never expected to watch his country prepare for extinction. Lagos was still standing. The Valorians had hit 3 cities, but they had left the rest of the world intact. A message, Yusuf understood. Surrender, or we will finish what we started. His commanding officer, a weathered woman named Captain Adiz, gathered the unit in the darkness of the ruined classroom. Outside, Valerian dropships descended like metal insects, their engines screaming as they approached. They think we are afraid because we are quiet, Captain Adiz said. Her voice was steady despite everything. They do not understand that we are quiet because we are thinking. Yusuf gripped his rifle tighter. Standard human weapons. Projectile-based. Primitive compared to Valerian plasma technology. Everyone knew they were outgunned. In O1 suggested surrender. Our job is simple, Adiz continued. Civilians are evacuating through the eastern corridor. We hold this position until they are clear. Whatever comes through those doors, we stop it. A soldier raised his hand. For how long, Captain? Adiz smiled without humor. Until we cannot stop it anymore. Across the planet, similar scenes played out in every nation. The Valorians expected to march into empty capitals and plant their flags. Instead, they found cities transformed into traps. In Berlin, an entire boulevard collapsed beneath a Valerian armored column. The humans had spent 2 days mining their own streets. In Tokyo, Valerian soldiers entered what they thought was a government building. The explosion killed 300 of them instantly. In Cairo, a human sniper team eliminated an entire Valerian command squad before vanishing into tunnels that had existed for thousands of years. High Sovereign Malthius received casualty reports with growing disbelief. How many lost? He demanded. 4,000 ground troops, High Sovereign, in the first 6 hours of surface operations. That is impossible. These creatures have no advanced technology. They should be helpless. His tactical officer hesitated before responding. They are not fighting with technology, High Sovereign. They are fighting with their environment. They know their world. Every building, every tunnel, every shadow. We are strangers here, and they're making us pay for it. Malthius slammed his fist against his command console. Send more troops. Overwhelm them with numbers. High Sovereign, perhaps we should reconsider. Other species have surrendered by now. These humans seem different. Different how? The tactical officer searched for the right words. They appear to be broken, High Sovereign, but they continue fighting anyway. I have never seen a species behave this way. Malthius dismissed the concern with a wave. They will break eventually. All species do. But doubt had taken root in his mind. A small seed of fear he refused to acknowledge. In her observation vessel, Ambassador Rien documented everything. She had studied the aftermath of Valerian conquests for decades. She knew the pattern. The survivors would mourn, then accept, then submit. Grief transformed into obedience. Pain became cooperation. Humans were doing something different. Their grief was transforming into something else entirely. Something the galaxy had no word for because no species had ever demonstrated it on this scale. They were turning their pain into fuel, Rien watched video feeds from the surface. Human soldiers advancing through rubble. Human civilians forming supply chains to feed their defenders. Human children helping their parents load ammunition. The entire species had become a single organism with a single purpose: survival through resistance. She recorded a message for her superiors. I have observed species collapse after losing thousands. The humans lost 12 million and have somehow become more unified, more determined, more dangerous. I do not believe the Valorians understand what they have awakened. Back in Lagos, Yusuf heard the Valorian troops approaching. Their boots made a distinctive clicking sound on the concrete. Their voices chirped in a language humans could not understand. Captain Adiz signaled for silence. The first Valorian entered through a broken window. Tall, thin, armored in dark metal. Its face was hidden behind a helmet that glowed with sensor arrays that IT never saw the tripwire. The explosion brought down half the building. Yusuf was thrown against a wall. His ears rang. Dust filled his lungs. But he was alive, and the Valorians were not. Move, Adiz commanded. Next position. Keep moving. Never let them catch their breath. They ran through the streets of Lagos, joining other units, falling back, regrouping, attacking again. The pattern repeated across the planet. Humanity would not stand and fight in pitched battles it could not win. Instead, it bled the enemy slowly. A cut here, a wound there, death by 1,000 strikes. Above the planet, Admiral Delgado watched the reports come in from her hidden position behind the moon. The ground forces were buying time, but time for what? For her fleet to prepare. For Dr. Lindqvist to finish her research. For humanity to find a weakness it could exploit. Admiral, her communications officer reported, the Valorian fleet is repositioning. They are preparing for orbital bombardment of additional cities. Rosa felt cold fury wash through her. More cities, more millions dead. How long until we are ready to move? She asked. 12 hours, Admiral. 12 hours. 12 hours while more of her people died. Then we move in 11, she said. And we make them remember what they did here. We make them remember for the rest of their lives. The fleet began final preparations in silence. The response was coming. Dr. Annika Lindqvist had not slept in 3 days. The Swedish xenobiologist worked in a laboratory buried deep beneath the Antarctic ice. Around her, captured Valorian equipment hummed and clicked. 3 enemy soldiers sat in containment cells, sedated and monitored. She had been studying them since the second day of the war. Taking samples, running tests, searching for anything that could turn the tide, and now she had found it. The pheromone network, she muttered into her recorder. They are connected to each other chemically. Like ants, like bees. Each individual is part of a larger whole. When they are together, they are confident, organized, fearless. She pulled up her latest data on the screen. But when isolated from the network, they collapse. Anxiety, confusion, terror. They have never learned to function alone because they have never needed to. Her hands trembled as she reached for the communication panel. This was it, the weakness humanity needed. Give me Admiral Delgado, she said. Priority Alpha. Tell her I know how we win this war. 3 hours later, the human fleet emerged from behind the moon. 147 ships. Carriers, destroyers, cruisers. Every vessel humanity could launch into space. It was not enough to match the Valorian Armada ship for ship, but humans had learned long ago that numbers were not everything. Admiral Delgado stood at the center of her flagship's bridge. She had received Dr. Lindqvist's report. She understood what needed to be done. All ships, she broadcast across the fleet. We are outgunned. We are outmatched. We are facing an enemy that has never lost a war. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. But they have never fought us. They do not know what we are capable of. They do not know that we have been fighting each other for 10,000 years. They do not know that we have survived ice ages, plagues, and the splitting of the atom. They think we are weak because we feel pain. Her voice hardened. Today, we show them what pain has taught us. Today, we show them that the species which should have died 100 times over is still standing. And we are very, very angry. The fleet accelerated toward the Valerian Armada. High Sovereign Maltheus watched the approaching human ships with contempt. They are outnumbered. What do they hope to accomplish? His tactical officer studied the formation. Unknown, High Sovereign. Their ships appear to be broadcasting some kind of signal. Wide-spectrum interference. Block it. We're trying. It is penetrating our communication bands. It is. High Sovereign. The signal is targeting our pheromone network. Maltheus felt the first flicker of genuine fear. What? Across the Valerian fleet, soldiers began to panic. The invisible web of chemical signals that connected them to each other was filling with static. Disruption, noise, and something else. The humans had studied the pheromone frequencies. They had learned how to broadcast into them, and they were filling the network with emotions no Valerian had ever felt. Loneliness, despair, the sensation of being utterly alone in a cold and hostile universe. Valerian soldiers screamed. Officers abandoned their posts. The perfect discipline that had conquered 200 worlds dissolved into chaos. What are they doing to us? Maltheus demanded. His tactical officer had tears running down his face. Not from sadness, from terror. They're making us feel what they feel, High Sovereign. They're showing us what it is to be alone. The human fleet struck. Missiles tore through Valerian ships whose crews could no longer coordinate their defenses. Human pilots flew directly into the teeth of enemy fire, knowing they would likely die, choosing to die anyway if it meant taking enemies with them. That a destroyer named Sao Paulo's Revenge rammed a Valerian carrier at full speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of plasma and fire. The crew had known they would not survive. They had volunteered anyway. Admiral Delgado watched the battle unfold on her tactical display. Every lost ship was a wound. Every dead crew member was family. But the Valorians were dying faster. Push forward, she ordered. Do not give them time to adapt. Do not give them time to recover. Press the attack. In her observation vessel, Ambassador Rien recorded everything with shaking hands. She had witnessed Valerian victories before. She had never witnessed anything like this. Humans were dying by the thousands. But they did not stop. They did not retreat. They flew broken ships into enemy formations. They manned guns until their ships fell apart around them. And all the while, that terrible signal continued to broadcast into the Valerian network, filling them with human emotions, making them feel for the first time in their existence what it meant to be truly alone. This is not a battle, Rien whispered into her recorder. This is something else. The humans are not trying to win in the traditional sense. They're trying to break the Valorians psychologically. They're teaching them fear. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it ended, the Valerian fleet had lost half its ships. The human fleet had lost more than half of theirs. But the humans were still fighting, and the Valorians were running. High Sovereign Maltheus ordered a retreat to their nearest colony. His hands trembled on the command console. The signal had touched him too. He had felt what humans felt, and he understood, finally, that he had made a terrible mistake. Admiral Delgado watched the enemy flee. Her face showed no triumph, only cold determination. Follow them, she said. This is not over until they can never threaten us again. The hunt had begun. The retreat was a disaster. Valerian ships jumped through hyperspace in random patterns, their crews too panicked to maintain formation. The chemical network that had always bound them together was now a weapon against them. Human signals continued to broadcast fear and isolation into every Valerian mind within range. High Sovereign Maltheus sat alone in his quarters, fighting to clear his thoughts. The emotions flooding through the network were not his own, but they felt real. The loneliness, the despair, the crushing weight of existence without connection. Was this what humans lived with every day? How did they survive it? A knock at his door. His first officer entered, looking as shaken as Maltheus felt. High Sovereign, the humans are pursuing. Their ships are damaged, but they refuse to stop. How many did we destroy? 60% of their fleet, High Sovereign, and they still chase us. The first officer nodded slowly. They appear to operate under the belief that they have nothing left to lose. Our analysts are calling them broken things that fight anyway. We have no protocol for engaging such an enemy. Malthus closed his eyes. His species had never needed courage because they had never faced true adversity. The network had always been there. The collective had always provided strength. The idea of fighting alone, in pain, without hope, was incomprehensible. Until now, on the surface of Earth, Private Yusuf Okonkwo advanced through the ruins of Lagos. The Valerian ground forces had collapsed. Without the network to coordinate them, the alien soldiers had lost all effectiveness. Some had simply stopped fighting, curling into fetal positions and keening in distress. Others had fled to their dropships, abandoning their invasion. And some had turned violent in their panic, lashing out at anything that moved. At Yusuf's unit moved through the destruction carefully. Captain Adiz led from the front, her rifle sweeping each corner. Contact ahead, someone whispered. They found a Valerian soldier huddled in a bombed-out cafe. Its helmet was off, revealing a face that might have been terrifying under other circumstances. Angular, alien, covered in fine scales that shimmered blue and silver. But the eyes were what stopped Yusuf cold. The eyes were filled with pure terror. The Valerian looked up at the human soldiers surrounding it. Its mouth moved, producing sounds that might have been words or might have been whimpers. "It is scared," Yusuf said. He had expected to feel satisfaction at this moment. The invaders who had killed millions were finally afraid. Instead, he felt only a hollow sadness. "Secure it," Adiz ordered. "Do not harm it unless necessary. Command wants prisoners." They bound the Valorian's hands with plastic restraints. It did not resist. It simply shook, overwhelmed by emotions it had never been designed to process. As they marched it toward the evacuation point, the Valerian managed a single question in broken, heavily accented English. "Why not kill?" Yusuf looked at the creature that had helped murder 12 million of his people. He thought about Sao Paulo, about Mumbai, about Chicago, about all the families that would never be whole again. "Because we are not you," he said. The Valerian stared at him with those terrified alien eyes. It did not understand. Perhaps it never would. Across the galaxy, Ambassador Rien received reports from every corner of Valerian space. The Dominion was crumbling. Subject species were rising up against their weakened masters. Colonies that had been subdued for generations were suddenly declaring independence. She recorded her observations carefully. The Valorians built their empire on fear. They broke their enemies psychologically before they ever engaged them militarily. They believed they understood terror better than anyone. She paused, watching footage of Valerian soldiers surrendering to human forces on Earth. They were wrong. The humans understand terror intimately. They have lived with it for their entire existence. Predators hunting them in the darkness. Ice ages freezing their world. Dizias killing millions. Wars between their own nations that lasted generations. They know fear better than any species in the galaxy. Her voice grew quiet, but they learned something the Valorians never did. They learned to function despite fear, to think despite pain, to hope despite despair. The Valorians are encountering this for the first time, and they have no defense against it. High Sovereign Malthus assembled his remaining commanders for an emergency council. The faces around him were drawn and haunted. The network was still corrupted with human emotional signals. Every Valerian in range was struggling just to maintain basic cognitive function. "We must surrender," one commander said bluntly. "We cannot fight an enemy that has turned our greatest strength into our greatest weakness." Surrender? Malthus felt rage cutting through his despair. "We are the Dominion. We have conquered 200 worlds. We do not surrender to primitives. Those primitives have just broken our fleet with psychology alone," another commander replied. "They have found a weapon we cannot counter. Our soldiers cannot fight while drowning in emotions they have never experienced." Malthus wanted to argue. He wanted to insist that Valerian superiority would prevail. But the fear in his own heart told him the truth. They had lost. His console chimed with an incoming transmission. A human face appeared on the screen. Female, older, eyes that held no mercy but also no cruelty. I am Admiral Rosa Delgado of the Earth Defense Fleet, the human said. Your forces have been routed. Your fleet is scattered. Your empire is collapsing around you. Malthus felt the words like physical blows. I offer you one chance to end this without further bloodshed. Surrender unconditionally, and your people will be treated with dignity. Refuse, and we will pursue you to the end of the galaxy. The transmission ended. Malthus stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Then he began composing his response. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace above Valora Prime. Below them lay the homeworld of the Dominion. Massive cities stretched across continents. Orbital stations circled the planet like jewels on a necklace. The heart of an empire that had conquered 200 worlds through fear and violence. Now that empire was dying. Admiral Rosa Delgado studied the tactical display with cold precision. The remaining Valerian warships had gathered here for a final stand. 47 vessels against her battered fleet of 63. The numbers were close enough to make this bloody. Admiral, her communications officer reported. High Sovereign Malthus is requesting to speak with you. Put him through. The alien leader appeared on her screen. He looked different than he had during the initial invasion. The arrogance was gone from his posture. The contempt had vanished from his voice. Admiral Delgado, I wish to propose terms. I'm listening. Malthus hesitated. What came next clearly cost him something vital. I offer myself in exchange for my people. Take me prisoner. Execute me if you wish. But spare Valora Prime. Spare the civilians who had no part in the decision to attack your world. Rosa felt something unexpected stir in her chest. Not sympathy, not forgiveness, but recognition. She had spent the past week imagining this moment. She had pictured Valerian cities burning. She had imagined repaying the destruction of Sao Paulo 100-fold. She had dreamed of vengeance so complete that the galaxy would remember it for 1,000 years. But looking at Malthus now, she did not see a monster. She saw a being who had made a terrible decision and was finally understanding its consequences. You killed 12 million of my people, she said. My daughter was among them. Malthus bowed his head. I know, and nothing I say can repair that damage. But my people do not deserve to die for my choices. They were born into the Dominion. They followed because following was all they knew. Rosa closed her eyes. Maria's face floated in her memory. Smiling, laughing, full of a life that had been stolen. What would Maria want her to do? Admiral, her first officer spoke carefully. Your orders? The bridge fell silent. Every crew member understood the weight of this moment. They had lost friends, family. They had earned the right to vengeance. Rosa opened her eyes. High Sovereign Malthus, I accept your surrender on the following conditions. You will be taken into custody and tried for crimes against humanity. Your military will be completely disbanded. Your subject worlds will be granted independence. And your species will never again build weapons capable of threatening another planet. Malthus nodded slowly. And my people, Valora Prime. Rosa looked at the beautiful world below her. Millions of lives. Civilians who had cheered when Earth burned, but who were also mothers and fathers and children who simply wanted to live. They will be unharmed, she said. We will not become what you are. Her crew stared at her in disbelief. Some with relief. Some with anger. Some with emotions too complex to name. Admiral, one officer said quietly. They killed millions. They would have enslaved us all. Yes, Rosa agreed. And that is exactly why we must be better than them. If we destroy their world, we prove that we are no different. We prove that the galaxy was right to fear us. She straightened in her command chair. We did not fight this war to become monsters. We fought it to survive. We have survived. Now we will show the galaxy what humans do when they win. The surrender proceeded in silence. Valerian warships powered down their weapons. Malthus was transported to the human flagship in restraints. His officers followed, one by one. Ambassador Rien watched from her observation vessel, recording everything. I have witnessed 17 Valerian victories, she spoke into her device. In every case, the Dominion destroyed the losing species utterly. They believed mercy was weakness. They believed compassion was a flaw to be eliminated. She watched as human medics tended to wounded Valerian prisoners, watched as human officers treated their captives with cold professionalism rather than cruelty. The humans could destroy Valora Prime. They have the firepower. They have the justification. Every law of the galaxy would support their right to vengeance. Her voice grew soft with wonder. They're choosing not to. They're choosing to be merciful to the species that showed them none. I do not understand why, but I believe this moment will be remembered long after the war itself is forgotten. On the surface of Earth, news of the surrender spread across every network. People gathered in the ruins of their cities to watch. Some wept. Some screamed for blood that would never be spilled. Some simply sat in silence, trying to process a victory they had never expected. Private Yusuf Okonkwo stood in the wreckage of Lagos and watched the broadcast with his unit. Captain Adiz stood beside him, her face unreadable. "Is it over?" someone asked. "The war is over," Adiz replied. "But I do not think the story is." Yusuf thought about the Valerian prisoner they had captured, the terror in its eyes, the question it had asked, why not kill? He finally understood the answer. Not because they were weak, not because they lacked the ability, but because choosing mercy was harder than choosing vengeance, and humans had always chosen the harder path. 1 year after the war ended, the Galactic Council assembled to hear Ambassador Rian's final report. Delegates from 100 species filled the Great Chamber. Some had been Valerian subjects, newly freed. Others had watched the conflict from safe distances, calculating which side they should support. All of them had come to understand the same truth. The galaxy had changed forever. Rian stood before the assembly, the documentary footage playing on screens that stretched across the chamber walls. Images of Earth burning. Images of human soldiers fighting in the ruins. Images of Admiral Delgado accepting Malthus's surrender. "I was sent to observe the conquest of a primitive world," Rian began. "What I witnessed instead was something none of us expected. A species that refused to surrender. A species that turned its greatest vulnerability into a weapon. A species that won a war against impossible odds and then chose mercy when destruction was within its grasp." The chamber remained silent. Every delegate listened. The Valerian Dominion has been dissolved. Their former subjects are free. High Sovereign Malthus awaits trial for his crimes. But the true legacy of this war is not political. It is the question that humanity has forced all of us to confront. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Were we willing to endure? Were we willing to sacrifice? And when we have won, what kind of victors will we choose to be? On Earth, the rebuilding continued. Sao Paulo was rising from its ashes. The crater where 12 million people had died was now a memorial garden, filled with flowers from every nation on the planet. People came from around the world to walk among the blossoms and remember what had been lost. Admiral Rosa Delgado walked those paths alone. She had retired from service 3 months after the war ended. There had been offers of promotion, political positions, speaking tours. She had declined them all. Now she stood before a small stone marker with her daughter's name carved into its surface. Maria Delgado, beloved daughter, taken too soon. "I do not know if I made the right choice," Rosa said quietly. "Sparing them, showing mercy. Part of me will always wonder if I should have burned their world the way they burned yours." The wind rustled through the garden. Flowers bent and swayed. "But I keep thinking about what you would have said. You were always the better person. Always the one who believed in second chances. I think you would have told me that hate never healed anything." She touched the stone gently. "I hope I made you proud." In Lagos, Yusuf Okonkwo worked on a construction site where a hospital had once stood. The city was rebuilding faster than anyone had expected. People had come from across Africa to help. Supplies had arrived from every continent. The war had reminded humanity of something important. They were one species. One family. Whatever differences had divided them before seemed small compared to what they had faced together. Captain Adiz found him during his lunch break. She had left the military too, returning to her hometown to help coordinate relief efforts. "I heard you were training the new volunteers," she said. Yusuf nodded. "Young people mostly. They want to help but do not know how. I show them what I can. Adiz studied him with those sharp eyes that had kept their unit alive through impossible odds. You have changed, Private. You seem peaceful. I have had time to think. Yusuf looked out at the half-constructed buildings rising around them. We survived something that should have destroyed us. We fought back when we should have lost. And when we won, we did not become the thing we fought against. He smiled slightly. If humanity can do all that, maybe we're not so broken after all. Far away, on a resettlement world at the edge of former Dominion space, a Valerian child asked her mother a question. Why did we lose the war? The mother looked down at her daughter with eyes that still carried the shadow of remembered fear. She had been on Valora Prime when a human fleet arrived. She had expected death. Instead, she had received transport to a new world and the chance to start over. We thought strength meant having no weaknesses, she said carefully. We believed that the strongest species was the one that felt nothing. No fear, no pain, no doubt. The child frowned. But the humans have all of those things. Yes, and that is exactly why they won. The mother pulled her daughter close. The humans showed us that true strength is not the absence of weakness. It is the ability to fight despite weakness, to keep going despite pain, to choose mercy despite having every reason to choose revenge. The child was quiet for a long moment. Do you think they will forgive us? I do not know, but they gave us the chance to earn forgiveness. That is more than we ever gave anyone else. Ambassador Rien finished her presentation to the Galactic Council. The delegates had listened for hours. Now they sat in thoughtful silence. Humanity has declined a permanent seat on this council, Rien announced. They say they prefer to remain observers until they better understand the galaxy. But I believe the truth is simpler. They do not wish to rule. They wish only to be left in peace. She paused one final time. I have studied predators and prey across 1,000 worlds. I have analyzed conquerors and conquered. I thought I understood how species survive in this galaxy. Her voice softened. The humans have taught me something new. They are neither predators nor prey, neither conquerors nor conquered. They are survivors. They endured everything the universe threw at them, and they refused to let their suffering make them cruel. She looked across the assembled delegates. That is why they frightened the Valorians. That is why they should frighten all of us. Because a species that can survive anything and still choose compassion is a species that will endure long after the rest of us are dust. The documentary ended. The screens went dark, and across the galaxy, 100 species began to wonder what humanity would become.